I'm going to start by saying thank you to them for all agreeing to be on this panel. I'm hoping we're going to have some really good interaction with everybody. So the events of the last couple of years are very well documented, and we've just heard from Drury on their take on the current outlook. As a panel, we're going to discuss those events, how they've changed how we do business in the breakbulk sector, and how we move forward together. We'll discuss some of the issues affecting rates at the moment, and we'll finish with a panel view of the future. So let's get started. And I'm hoping that we can all chat and we can, don't talk over each other, guys, but we can have a bit of discussion. And if there are questions from the audience, we'll try and get those in as well. So let's start with, and I'm going to start with Kyriakos because you're first to my left. So how has the pandemic market changed how you conduct business? We're going to ask all of you this, but Kyriakos, you go first.
Yeah. Well, first, the pandemic has shown us unprecedented times. We had challenges from the one hand, and then we had good party times on the chartering side. It was an unexpectedly rapid development, which at first instance we tried to cope with that. That was the biggest challenge we had, trying to cope with the challenges on the supply chain disruption. And so at the same time, we tried to cope with the cargo demand as it started to grow rapidly. What we took away from that, because we can discuss for days about the pandemic and what has brought. In brief, I think it was a time that brought a complete review on your business model for what you're doing, because this is the time that for decades we haven't experienced that dramatic cargo growth. So it was a time that we have tested our service models, we have tested our structure. That was a time also to test our fleet and overall future trend of the industry itself. So that was a time we had placed a long-term plan towards what's coming next in terms of the fleet, in terms of the service models, in terms of the structure. Then, of course, it was a time that showed us that we have also accumulated some reserves so we can build our long-term strategy. We made good profits, that's no secret.
And we're going to talk about this a little bit later.
Okay. So it was, I think, pandemic and the last 2 years, it's something that we will stay in the future decades of lectures about shipping, and it will stay in memory, I think, for forever.
Thank you. Lovely. Dennis?
Well, my take on it would be just one word, basically, adaptation. Over these couple of years, 3, including the pandemic and the differences in the market, has been truly volatile. So the way companies got adapted to, and also ourselves, to the changing conditions of pretty much anything from up and down, down and up. That has been just interesting to see how adaptation was the work. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. Ishan.
Well, let's take the pandemic in terms of an occasion that normally there was an interruption in the supply chain, and if my colleague is talking about adaptation, I talk about flexibility. And here you can always realize that, for example, as a container shipping line, we needed to have great flexibility in moving around, number one. Number two, and if I talk a little bit about the region here in Middle East and connection of the region to global market, you will see that, naturally we were in the center of the thing, in the middle of everything happening between China, Europe and USA. And then the question of supply and demand was very much about, let's say, the word of flexibility that shipping line would then put in place, especially container shipping line. We had congestions everywhere that we had to, let's say, work with. We had issues of containers, which was held up in many places. And to be honest, I mean, it was a challenging period of time, no doubt. But then the lesson learned was quite great in terms of how you can maneuver in terms of the best interest that you would want to put in place in moving around. Of course, I mean, the relation of these to break bulk and the break bulk pieces that a container shipping line then would handle is quite, let's say, complicated in terms of the availabilities and so on and so on. But then, in a nutshell, I would say that the general takeaway from these 2 years was very much related to how you have the enough flexibility as shipping line to move around, and then, of course, I mean, profitability is something, but also commitment to the customers is another thing, which normally we know how it is in the shipping industry when you have certain commitment and then you have to fulfill your commitments and with the challenges that you have. So if really you don't have the flexibility and adaptation, as my colleague said, then it's very difficult. But we have seen that a lot of shipping lines, including ourselves, we have had hard time, but then things was moving, and what we are seeing today in terms of the ease of the business that we are seeing, and I'm sure we will talk about it a little bit later, is the result of the great flexibilities that we had during this pandemic period of time.
Thank you. Andy, do you want to take us to the other side of the equation? I love how you've all sat in that way, actually.
Yeah, so from a freight forwarding perspective, obviously we don't have assets similar to the carriers, but we have our people. I think that's been the biggest constraint. Everyone's been under such pressure to work in different environments, work from home, from the kitchen table or wherever it may be, and also not travel. So I think the value of our people is something that we really appreciate probably more than ever. It was always crucial to freight forwarding anyway, of course, being either without assets or asset light. And then furthermore, it's the relationships with the carriers, with the EPCs that's really important to us. So I think we're still not in a commoditized industry, thankfully. And we need to sell solutions. So as a freight forwarder, we need to connect with our clients, with our carriers. We don't just sell space, we sell grillage design, engineering, stow plans, schedule efficiencies. And I think coming together at Breakbulk and just in general in business will really be a big focus for us at DHL Industrial Projects. Those connections are where we can get the best solutions and hopefully differentiate from our competition, but also bring the biggest benefit. So I think it's the main thing from our side. But on a more reflective note, we were quite fortunate because we at DHL, being a large brand, are not necessarily reliant upon just projects. So we were quite lucky, I would say, but it was also part of the infrastructure of what we do that we had good base business. So we had lots of term contracts, and that really helped us. So during the pandemic, we had no COVID-related redundancies, we had no pay freezes or anything like that. And if anything, we've actually accelerated our growth, and that's something that we'll continue with now. So people focused and continuous growth.
Thank you, Andy. And Stephanie, from the EPC point of view.
Yeah, so from an EPC perspective, definitely we've had to reevaluate and change, adapt. I'm sure that the adapting and flexibility will be common terms in this panel today, but we absolutely have had to change how we approach, and that could mean awarding contracts later than we usually would, closer to execution, where previously we could award them well in advance. And again, that's because of the volatility and keeping a close eye on our budgets. It could mean that we, increase our bidder pool so that we have a broader view of the market. It means a lot of things, and I think that we will have to continue to adapt. I don't think that we're in a situation right now where we can come to any conclusion on how we're going to move forward. So being flexible, continuing to adapt, adding more contingency, but ultimately there's a lot to think about.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's set the scene for everybody. I think I'd like to dig a little bit closer into how we move forward. And Andy, you spoke about some solutions there, but can freight forwarding, big question, can freight forwarding solve all or most of the supply chain problems? Where are the gaps?
I think that's a tough
Good job with practice this, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. But no, freight forwarding can't. I don't think freight forwarding as an industry holds enough decision making within the supply chain to be able to dictate what happens. But we've definitely got a role to play. We are the conduit. We connect in between the different stakeholders, understanding the needs and the wants and hopefully the priorities of our clients, but then also being empathetic to the carriers, knowing what they've got in terms of restrictions, whether that's to do with fleet size, capacity, other areas of focus, and congestion has been a big thing in the past as well. So I think from a freight forwarding perspective, we can't solve the problem, but maybe we can mediate, maybe we can look to connect. And I think problems are solved best if you do it as a collective. So if it's not just the party that either writes the check or has the most to gain or has the loudest voice, but if people can come in from different perspectives with perhaps alternative views, and actually if everyone can gain at least something from a solution, then it's more likely to be lasting. So no, we can't solve everything. We can't fix issues. We can't undo what was done in the past. When you look at projects that are still being delivered today that had budgets set in 2018, 2019, and we're told that the budgets don't meet the market and the market should support, the market's a market. Unfortunately, that can't change. It's supply and demand, and it's dictated by lots of other factors. But working with our clients to see if there are pressures, whether that's cost or schedule or others, then that's probably the way in which we can do it the best, collectively, and through transparency, and then hopefully mitigating challenges before they become problems.
Thank you for that. And I think we'll talk about a few more of those issues in a little bit. But Stephanie, from the EPC point of view, how do we, what are you looking for to move those relationships forward? What do you need?
So when we're selecting an EPC, it's a balance of the technical and the financial criteria. So it remains the same that we still need solutions from the freight forwarders. But it doesn't mean that financial takes precedence, right? So we need to have a balance there. We need to continue to build our relationships, and as you said, the congestion, and there's all kinds of different factors. We all face our own challenges. A pandemic was followed by a war that's followed by some other global influencing factors. So there are a lot of changes, and there are a lot of other influences, not just the pandemic, but we do need to continue to move forward. Transparency is key in a volatile market, and working together collaboratively, and visibility on the challenges that each other are facing. And we need to work together even more than we ever have to come to a reasonable, mutually beneficial technical and financial solution.
Thank you. That's superb. I think, Carols, you don't get away with this question, but we'll phrase it slightly differently. I'm wondering about how do you provide that greater level of confidence in the reliability and the delivery of service going forward? Hisham, do you want to start that one? Come back down the line.
And let's say that you have a supply chain, and let's say that you have various elements of this supply chain. One of the elements is certainly the shipping line part, but then let's say other supply chain. The supply itself is having a lot of other elements in between. Our carrier point of view is very simple and easy. Saying that we come to a port, we need the cargo to be ready, we load the cargo and we go. Now, we have seen that in the past, before pandemic, that relatively this was an easy task, let's say. I mean, you fix a cargo and you come with your ship and then you load and you go. But then we saw and we learned, as I said earlier, that you need to deal with the challenges in between. And we have seen, I mean, the congestions, strikes, weather, you name it, various challenges that is in place in terms of how then you can selectively put the supply chain elements together so that it can work. I mean, if I run through a simple model that there is an EPC contractor, a forwarder, shipping line, trucking company in between both at end, and then final customer. Very easy and very simple. But then you kind of put everything together and you see that, well, a takeaway from this is that you need to, find solutions for problems that it is there. And I mean, in a normal life, you would not imagine that you can come with your ship, for example, the cargo is in the port, but suddenly you see that there is a strike. Suddenly you see that the weather is not good and you have to skip the port because and you need to catch a window somewhere. Or, for example, for us here in Middle East, we need to catch the convoy of the Suez Canal, for example. So various elements in between, let's say, that you need to carefully look at it. We call all of these part of the planning which we do in between. And we do this, by the way, daily in terms of how you can then coordinate between various parties. Of course, the first line for us is the freight forwarder at the end, and then the operator of the ports, let's say the authorities of the port and everything, so that collectively things could be moved around, let's say, on time. When I say on time, I mean there was a word generally used before pandemic, which was the word on-time delivery, that we used to use it a lot, actually, between us, freight forwarders, customers, EPC contractors, because there was penalties, fines for delays, and so on and so on. So we had this impression saying that on-time delivery. Now, after pandemic, and they're trying to remember this, and then trying to, and let's say, go through again the same practice that was there, hopefully, let's say. And again, I mean, things as far as we are concerned, because our business is very dynamic. And the dynamic on this is coming from the fast movements of the ship, and things can happen. So, again, I mean, it is the cooperation between all the players within the supply chain that will make the life easy for the final customer that receives the cargo, or for the shipper that load the cargo on board of the ship.
Okay, thank you. Dennis, about reliability and how we give a greater level of confidence to your customers about that.
Kind of sorry to repeat myself, but to be adaptive still. It's the name of the game now. That has been these couple of years. We're not done with changes. We are yet to see more. I don't know if they as dramatic as we've been seeing, but you know, the thing is, the whole world is in a bit of an instability at the moment, so we need to be prepared. And then, taking that flag, you need to be with the customers because, you know, at the end of the day, I agree, it's very simple. Customer is happy, everyone is happy, everything moves. So, to be adaptive to new requirements, technical, moral, political, you know, ships availability and so on. This is the answer today. At the end of the day, market has its forces. It expects us to be within the certain position of the market. and it's really not going to, go adopting with you. At the end of the day, we're still in the service industry. It will be us who would need to be adaptive. So that's the only way to keep up with the level of confidence, whether it's lower or high. Within rest, we just have to provide. And to do that, that's adaptivity again. Sorry, it's boring.
No.
That other people again it sound, but that's it.
I think we're all here to hear what the answers are. Kyriakos, what about from?
Yeah, I would continue where there is, you need stability. That volatility we have in the market makes it difficult for both shippers and carriers. There's so many drivers now that all your planning basically goes upside down if something changes. And what we have seen and what we have experienced over the past years, it's not mature behavior by the market. You need the market to behave maturely so you can plan much more accurately, and then you can make also forward contracting, which is also important for both sides and all the stakeholders within the industry to align. I think, first of all, we need to have stability and a mature market behavior. We've gone a long way, and that's for true. We've gone a long way for sides. We are on a constant daily exchange, constant daily planning discussions, how to make it work. And we are on, as far as AEL or on the carriers I'm expressing here, we are on the service industry. So, as Dennis mentioned, if you are a service provider, then you need to adjust, you need to be adaptive, you need to change your service models, and you need to go by the trends of the industry and by the trends of the demand. But at the same time, the same demands comes from the shipper side. Now we have to enhance further, I think, the landscape we are working on, whether this is pricing, which is very important, whether this is landscape logistics, which is also important, and all these side fundamentals that we all need to work on a stable path. And then business will be much more predictable and much more smoother than what it's today or what it has been the last 2 decades.
Okay. Stability, I think, is the big buzzword here. I'm going to take this back to Andy and Stephanie, and I think we've spoken about stability a lot, and the carriers are talking about that quite a bit. And I'm just wondering how you effectively allow for the those imbalances, especially the volatility we've seen in the last couple of years. How you can you account for that in sort of future and post-award situations? Andy, do you want to go first on that one?
I was going to let Stephanie.
Let Stephanie answer that. That's fine. Let Stephanie answer that. We haven't heard enough from Stephanie.
Yeah, so the biggest challenge for an EPC is the time frame from when we from proposals to execution, right? So the instability affects the project as a whole, and we need to get it back to a stable position, and we need to continue to adapt, but commercially, it's and technically, it comes back again to flexibility. We need support. We need options. We need the freight forwarders and the carriers to understand the different origins, the regions that are having the most challenging and issues. I mean, we had strikes in the UK. We had issues still with COVID in China recently that impacts our shipments. So we're looking for solutions again. Because we need to deliver our projects, and we need to do it on time, and we need to, we need the stability, unfortunately, yeah.
So, those of you making notes, that's the first buzzword, stability, okay?
Adaptation.
Adaptability.
Adapting.
Adaptability.
Adaptability. Stability and adaptability. 2 buzzwords so far. Okay. I think also, if I can add one, I've been saying for a long time that it's about the capacity, and we heard from Drury actually, it's about the utilisation of the fleet. And one of the things that I've said for a long time is how the container lines move their cargo requirements, if you like, their cargo demand within the sector. And I think, Kishan, this is all for you. This is your big question. It was in bold on the list. Okay. So first, for the rest of us to determine how the MPV fleet is going to work, we need to have a better idea. So I'm just wondering how you, as a container carrier, how you view the forward capacity in the fleet and your thoughts of how that will impact onto the breakbulk and project cargo sector.
Very very good question. Actually, let me take you back 6-7 years ago, maybe a little bit more. At the time that container ships was only for container ships. And I mean, there was no trend in the market that a container ship would carry any break bulk pieces, let's say, many years ago. And here, the break bulk pieces was only going on the break bulk ships, MPVs, and so on and so on. The trend started where we then tried to accommodate, let's say, a few pieces of break bulk, and then we saw that yes, a container ship practically is something that can be used also for break bulk pieces. The thing continued, and then today we have a product actually that we are selling, saying that in a container ship where it goes from point A to point B, we are able to carry certain pieces of break bulk for cargo, being an addition to what we do. Now, I'll take you to a snapshot of a shipping line like MSC that we have, let's say, global service everywhere, almost from everywhere to everywhere. And the connectivity of the ports are great, let's say. So practically to say that we could connect anywhere to anywhere with our ships. We try to do this break bulk thing as much as possible on a direct shots, direct lines between point A and point B. But then even if it is a transshipment in between, then we are doing it. So the utilization you're mentioning here is quite flexible in terms of, let's say, a container ship. We just need to make sure that we have the right dimension, the right place in our ship, because the ships anyhow are moving. Now, the challenging part here, and I talk about the pandemic, where the ships was quite full with very high freight rates on the container itself. So you imagine that you have a scenario that you have a full ship going from point A to point B with very high freight rates. The ship is completely full up to the neck, and then you need to arrange again for a piece that needs to go on board and make it sense in terms of business and, let's say, utilization of the ship, profitability of the ship, the wage calculation, and so on and so on, that still you take that piece on board. Now, the period is past. Today I can tell you that it is relevantly easy. There is not a problem, because today the ships, everybody knows, it's not a secret to say the ships are not full that much, and this, let's say, flexibility of taking the pieces on board is greatly available to great extent, let's say, almost everywhere.
Okay. From what we've just heard to Dennis and Kyriakos, and I'm thinking more about demand for your ships rather than the ships themselves. We'll talk about the ships themselves in a minute. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves with our thoughts. I'm just wondering what your challenges are given the renewed competition going forward and the demand for that cargo for your ships. If you want to go first, Dennis.
Well, I mean, obviously that is the challenge to start with. But in a pure MPP sort of sector, I think the biggest one is going to look like the bit of a difficulty to renew the fleet. to have a bigger orders and think of it like not a 5, maybe 10, 15 years up front. That's I would think that all of us sort of facing in a moment. That will coupled with the technical problems, not problems, but the issues that the market will be demanding more and more. That's probably going to pose some challenge in the sense of making sure that we're there, again, within the adaptation, the thing. But it also will create some sort of map on the market. So that will push for demand more for good ship, let's say newer ship, more equipped ship, new designs most probably. The wind sector will be demanding probably totally new approach on the shipbuilding side and all that. So that will, I think it will put us in a better place eventually. I think we just in the previous panel saw the slides about, and that actually quite representable as well. So that is from our side, the only one. But of course, market forces, they are not yet disappearing. And yeah, we see container carriers started doing it, and we are between us still competing, and well, we've probably been easy on each other the last couple of years, but it's going to come, and that's still again, it's a service, it's a perfect competition world. So that's going to be challenging to optimize supply. But again, look at this. In our lives, basically, that's not a challenge, just a rule of engagement, basically.
Okay.
To my view, the newer fleet and the new designs, what we need to still grasp and go for, that's a bigger one.
Okay. Thank you. Kyriakos?
I can only share our experience as a group looking to the new buildings. Nobody knows what will be the ship of the future at this present time. And we have spent quite considerable time sitting down with our technical engineering and all to come up with what is the next generation of the future ships, at least on the project, but on the wider shipping industry. And that's the reason, because so far in the multi-purpose segment, unlike the containers that they rush to put 7 million of TEU capacity into new building, in the MPP sector, I feel we have managed well. We didn't go that crazy. We didn't go into building overcapacity in the future, because we are still not 100% sure what will be the ship of the future. From our experience, we're building new buildings now, and we know for sure that they are compliant with the new IMO regulations and all the other drivers up to 2035. So it's a big dilemma. What new builds are you building for the future? And because there's so much push on the sustainability and on the greener environment, and there's no infrastructure in place now to cater. We're talking a lot about methanol, we're talking about fossil fuels, but there's no real adequate infrastructure in place for shipping lines to make it a sustainable business model, and at the same time to secure financing and all the rest of it. So we are still at this point of time, I say we can only build the ships that will be up for the next 10, 12 years.
Okay. Well, that's not bad for a ship, though, is it? 10, 12
Well, and that's basically, we're going to face, tight supply challenges as far as
Kyriakos has taken us a little bit forward. I think, Dennis, you want to...
No, I just wanted to add, it's a 10 years, you would think it's a decent perspective, but actually it's not, it's very short.
Here.
And we all in the same boat in this one, like we don't really like, at the moment, on the sustainability and Green Deal kind of issue, we think we are at the limit of our technical capacity. Now, what if in 5 years there is a new requirement and you have just built these ships that fit there? So you'll probably go into the new adjustment and no one knows where it ends. So I think what Kyriakos I just wanted to add, that this is the big challenge to look like, what about 20 years? I mean, are we not going to change, or even our take towards the renewable life, the Green Deal, the greener planet, and so on? So, because as we've seen last sort of year, we're not, as a humanity kind of thing, sorry for philosophical thing, but we're not really doing much to be greener.
Yep.
So what if we cancel it tomorrow? You know what I mean?
And mind you, the shipbuilding now is 40% more than what it used to be back in a decade ago, 5 years ago. So it's an investment which comes with a big consideration. What will be the future ship?
Or with the future sharing. Andy and Stephanie, on that basis, given that the carriers are saying that we're not sure what the future ship is, and we can probably only look 10 years, and you possibly look a bit further than that. I'm just wondering, to take us back a little bit, what do you consider to be those main risks in the future of securing the assets for your projects? Would you agree that that's what it's all about? It's all about the future ship, or is there something else that we're missing?
I think it's almost to Stephanie's point before, where the owners, the EPCs, are looking for options and solutions and choices. I think from a freight forwarding and then an asset owner's perspective, probably looking more for decisions. So we can put lots of options and solutions out there. We can say this is what's possible, but then hanging on to those decisions and hoping that either a better opportunity comes up or rates soften. I think that's a real risk, and then it fuels into the asset owners in terms of their visibility and what they can commit to with secured orders. To the point of what's the future, in terms of required ships look like, I think you've almost got to go to that far extreme and just say they've got to be green, they've got to be completely carbon neutral. Don't look to achieve the next IMO, regulatory standard, because, as Kyriakos and Dennis said, another one comes afterwards. So I think until you get to completely carbon neutral offerings, you're never going to get to the end of the line. But technology has a big part to play in that, infrastructure, so having the needed fuel sources as well. So I don't think it's anything that one party can solve, but again, through transparency and engagement, I think that'll make a difference. We see from our perspective, dealing with different owners, different industry sectors, that now the pandemic is finally, and China being a big one, of course, finally eased back to a point where construction can get back into full swing. We think there was going to be quite a rush, actually. And there was a term that I got told repeatedly in the military, which was first up, best dressed. And I think that's going to be really accurate.
So say that again.
First up, best dressed. So I think there won't necessarily be a race, but I think there will be a realization that asset owners, carriers, operators will not be able to support everything that comes across the table, which will in effect cause its own imbalance again. So I think it's a fine line, and I think the carriers will probably enjoy another few years of good times for sure.
Stephanie, I think
I am sorry, I have a comment which I must mention. Actually, talking about 10 years on the road, the ships are important, commitment of forwarders, APC contractors are very important, but also the consideration of the infrastructure of the ports is very important also.
Yep.
In shipping industry, you see that shipping lines were very fast in terms of upgrading their assets. You see the forwarders are going very fast in terms of upgrading their softwares and the infrastructure they have in terms of warehousing and so on and so on.
Right.
But then you see that the ports around the world are very slow in terms of upgrading their infrastructure. And this is a bottleneck actually when you talk about 10 years or even more future of certain thing, let's say, called project or called even internal business or any business that you are doing in terms of the whole, let's say, supply chain. Because one important part of the infrastructure, which is the ports, is not upgrading as fast as it should be actually. And this is, as I said, this is a very big bottleneck, which we normally see it differently. That the speed is not as up to the speed of the trade, and this then put them together with the elements of, for example, strikes, or element of congestions, and so on and so on. Then you will see that there is a challenge here in terms of how we want to address the future. And we're saying, I have bigger ships, I have more capacity, I have, for example, better equipped freight forwarders, better for warehousing system. But then I have very slow moving upgrade of the ports that is creating, let's say, a kind of imbalance situation in terms of how you want to look at the whole supply chain and put them together. Say that now I have a situation that I can move the cargo without any problem in terms of, let's say, supply and demand that we are talking about here.
I think that's a really good point, Hisham, and thank you very much. And to the organisers, next time we meet, we need a port on the panel as well. So just thumbs up from the back from Liz. I think that's a really good point. Just to finish off on this one, Stephanie, I just wondered from the EPC point of view, were there any particular risks for the assets that you wanted to talk to us about?
I think just to build on what everyone's already said, it's predictability and consistency in the market, and we can address that by engaging early, working with the freight forwarders, the carriers to understand where the market is going. Sustainability is great for the overall industry, and that definitely needs to be pursued. Reduces the overall carbon footprint for the projects at the end of the day. So it's a joint effort, and I think that again, it's predictability and consistency. We that's our biggest risk, and we need to continue. I think relationships are key at the moment in this type of market, that we need to be more aligned, coordinate more, collaborate more to reduce those risks to the best of our ability, and rely on the service providers to help us technically and operationally to achieve that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Today you had two more buzzwords there, predictability and consistency. We've got a big clock in front of us, and I am going to finish by asking the panel to do a very brief, you've got a big clock in front of you, 2 minutes only, each of you, what their view of the next 6 to 12 months is, because I know that's really what you're all waiting for. But I just wondered, were there any questions for our panel? They weren't warned about this, but if there are any questions that we think we can answer, you've got a few minutes to do that. Go on there, straight on the front row. Can you let us know who you are and where you're from? And who you're directing it to? Okay, this one's for you, Kyriakos. That was a...
Hello, good day. My name is Thomas Denens. I work for Belfort Ship. Hi, Susan. Kyriakos, my question is for you. Sorry, it's about sustainability actually, and about our friends at IMO who want to reduce the greenhouse gases. In going forward, the way I see it, carriers will have to steam slower. So that means, capacity will be taken away from the market. Would that drive up the rates? That was it, mate.
Oh, I like that one, Thomas. That was a good one. Although we were trying not to ask that question, but anyway, good for you. Well done, Kyriakos.
I heard you loud and clear. I think the slow steaming question goes more to containers and bulk carriers. In multi-purpose, as you know, we're carrying cargo that is very precious. So we already, for years, on a slow steaming policy, and we are following that suit. That's not going to change. So we are following that. Now, to deal with overcapacity, I don't think that the MPP market suffers from that. I don't think that. What we're suffering is from overaged fleet. With a certain point of time, we, as a human being, we have to deal more or have to be more sensitive with the environment. So there are quite a number of ships that they need to go for scrap because they don't meet the criteria, they don't meet the regulations. And we need the shippers to be more of sustainability drivers, that they will be assessing, vetting the carriers or the partners they want to work with, whether they meet those environment criteria. And this is what we all need to do. And we all need to invest money, time, resources towards a future. And that's not coming only for carriers, because we already embarked on that and we've been doing it for years. Millions and millions of our reserves are invested in sustainability and green environment. What we need now, it's also the wider environment to cope with that trend. And we've seen this with the majors, and they've got already vetting approval processes that caters for that. But we need to more on the containers, on the bulk carriers, on the tankers, on the other segments as well. But slow steaming is there, to answer your question, and it's been going on for years, and we're not going to change it.
Thank you for that, Kyriakos. Anybody else? So I will ask the panel to give us their final thoughts for you. Okay. I'm gonna start at the other end and come back down this way. So really, it's just briefly your thoughts for the next 6 to 12 months on the Great Balkan Project cargo market going forward, starting with Stephanie.
I think it'll remain volatile for the foreseeable future. And as I mentioned before, we came out of a pandemic, but we went into a war. And again, there's other global influencing factors and a lot of things changing at the moment still. I think everyone is working towards establishing, some consistency again. We've had a lot of changes. We've all been really working really hard these past couple of years to just react to the continuous influences. So now we need to start getting back to reestablishing how we do things. And I don't want to use that word normal, because I don't think that it
Because that's
anymore.
to.
That's a fair word, right? But I think just getting back into consistency, but also recognizing that I think that we're in a situation where we're going to have to continue to adapt, continue to be flexible. We've all had, this is an unprecedented situation. I think all of our experience has also been unprecedented. So I think that the only path forward really is to work together. We're all in this together. We're all having the same challenges, but we all have our different perspectives on how that impacts us. So I think going forward, it'll still be a little bit busy. I don't think the dust has completely settled at the moment. But I think we're learning some great new skills on being adaptable and flexible, and collaboration is key going forward. So I think the market, we still have some fun for the next, at least this year anyhow.
Still some way to go. Thank you for that. Andy.
Picking up on what Stephanie said, we all know what we want, which is to get back to a level of consistency without using the word normal. And I think getting back into a normal project, I just used it, but getting back into the project cycle is really important. So being at the front end, having that initial feed engagement, following that through, understanding what the solutions are, sharing with our subcontractors what assets may be needed and required, understanding if there's constraints or limitations. I think going through that full phase of a project will be really crucial to that. We see, as I mentioned before, a lot coming online. I think there'll be a lot of opportunity for all of us. So at the same time, we also need to be transparent, because the last thing that Stephanie or others want to hear is, sorry guys, we just can't support that. I know you've set your budget, you'll set your schedule and your requirements, but what you're looking for is no longer available. So getting into that full visibility, I think, will be really key, and that's why that's been disconnected a little bit due to the pandemic. But why we're all here, we're here to obviously meet with colleagues, with peers, with clients, with subcontractors, and I think breakbulk events and what we do as an industry still needs to be maintained. And the biggest worry from our perspective is that our clients go down the path of commoditizing what we do. So the whole idea that a procurement representative that perhaps was looking at stationery last week is procuring for a project this week, and the RFQs are too prescriptive, doesn't leave room for solutions and for innovations and for efficiencies, and then there's a challenge back to the engineers and the project teams within the EPCs, but throughout the supply chain, that you've always been forced down a path. So I think collaboration, transparency and early engagement would be the keys for us, and I think that in the next 6 months will be really crucial, because afterwards it's going to get busy. That's what we're hoping for, but I think it also makes sense. When you look at the oil and gas companies and some of the profits that have been disclosed, they certainly need to spend that money somewhere, and to the point of the war, the lack of gas and oil out of Russia has obviously also left a gap in the market that needs to be filled. So there's lots that has to happen. It's a question of when it happens, are we going to have taken enough time to be prepared for it?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Excellent. The shampoo.
Well, for me, if you don't mind, I will go more than 6 months, 12 months. I look at the thing, let's say, on a level or span of 2 years, let's say. And I talk about a specific this region in terms of all the projects which are coming on board. In Middle East, including Saudi Arabia, we have, let's say, in coming months, years to go, huge projects to come. And looking at the perspective of, let's say, okay, let us look at our crystal ball and see what will happen in, let's say, a year's time, or maybe 2 or maybe 3, with all these projects coming on board. I would say that it needs integration of all parties together, because the numbers are huge as what we are hearing it. The demand will be so high in the region itself that dictates a lot of responsibilities, actually, in terms of delivering all these projects which are on the air today and will be executed sooner or later. For example, for us in Saudi Arabia, we have on the Red Sea huge projects that are coming on board. It was on paper for a couple of years' time, but then we are seeing that it is full-fledged now on a screen, and it is going. So here I would say that, yes, the market is very dynamic in that regard, but then it is very demanding. The issue of supply and share and demand is somehow getting harder and harder, because at the end, the number of projects that, if you look at the list, the number of projects on the list is endless almost. So yes, there is, let's say, global demand, but also there is regional demand, and particularly for some of the countries in the region, that needs to be looked at. Integration is the name of the game, I think, in terms of all the parties. If really we want to deliver all these projects within the period of the deadlines, and then make the life easy for everyone in the chain, let's say.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for bringing in the Middle East projects. Excellent. Thank you. Dennis.
Good. Well, we obviously now is in a little hole, which is a bit of a painful, but even now we've started seeing the new kick for the springtime. So I think if you look at the 6 months projective, that's probably going to stay in a mode of rebalancing. And summerish, we'll probably start seeing a bit of a bouncing up with the decent overlooking 2024. And I agree, there are a lot of Middle Eastern oriented projects are coming, they're huge. Yes, Saudi and Red Sea alone can actually influence the market already with some increase. The wind is a big hope for everyone when it starts working out for the closer to the end of 23. It will start taking the space out, so that's going to be good. So that's my take. By end of 23, we will be in a healthier. Of course, having said that, I would like to be understood correctly, we're not going to see anything like 22. There was some element of inflation and bubble that we will definitely come out with a decent number. Then, of course, we'll need to see how the market, the owners react to things, operators, forwarders. I mean, that's a whole line in the segment. But overall, that's going to be healthy by the end of the year. And 24, we'll start seeing even higher numbers.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Kyriakos.
I believe nobody can predict.
I thought we were friends.
I believe nobody can predict, and whoever says that cannot base this on real fundamentals, because we have always been wrong. If you take the fundamentals, I can give examples. This year we expected a rosy wind energy. What we see, postponement of projects, slower approvals, big interest rates, inflation, so it's pushing it back. So again, when all the fundamentals are there saying that we're going to have a rosy wind, as the experts are here as well too. We don't have that. The feedback we're getting now from the major European and US manufacturers is that everything is pushed back, slower approval. When you look into the oil and gas, everybody expected this year we're going to have a 20% increase in capex. Again, same situation. Slow approvals, financing delays, inflation costs moving up. So that impact of the higher capex is diluting. When you look into mining, what we have seen in the market last 6 months, there's less and less capex what was initially planned towards iron ore, steel, and is more pushed towards the valuable minerals. What I'm saying is that everything is reversing what you're expecting, and because the market is so volatile, geopolitical, chain supply disruptions, financing, interest rates, inflation, everything basically works together to reverse what you expect. I think the only one which is based on actual fact that you can expect, yes, we have tight supply of ships. At least we know it for sure because there's no new buildings. And we don't see that changing as the markets are moving now towards more pressure on the freight rates. We don't see that changing. We don't see that intention of carriers now placing more new builds because the volatility of the market, the financing is not there, the new building prices is so high because of all the other drivers. Wait and see scenario, I would say, but in certain industries like oil and gas and wind energy, yes. As from what the feedback we're getting is that long term it will be rosy. Short term,
Okay.
so many
So you heard it here.
others.
Volatility still to come. We've still got some way to go in this sector, I think. Kyriakos thinks rosier in the future. Can you join in me and thank the panel? I think they've been excellent.
Thank you.
even if difficult to get together. I'll just say that there. But thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. And thank you to the organisers for the opportunity. Thank you very much, Breakbolt.